Blood marked the trail for the first 3 days, then nothing but broken branches and the faint impression of boots dragging through mud. And Cade Yancey had tracked worse quarry through more hostile terrain during his years serving the Crown, before settling into this quieter life as a frontier ranger. The merchant's daughter had vanished from the trading post near the border hills 6 days ago, and her father had offered enough coin to make even a man content with solitude reconsider his priorities, though Cade would have taken the job regardless, because that was simply who he was. The spring rains had made tracking difficult, washing away scent and softening the earth until every print became a judgment call. But he had followed the signs deeper into territory where civilized folk rarely ventured, past the last marked trees and into the wild places where old stories still held truth. The cave opening appeared on the 6th day like a wound in the hillside, half hidden behind a curtain of vines that had not grown there naturally, but had been deliberately arranged to conceal the entrance. Cade dismounted from his bay mare and tied her to a sturdy oak, then checked his blade and the smaller knife at his belt before approaching on foot. The sun hung low in the western sky, painting everything in shades of amber and shadow, and he knew he should wait for morning, but 6 days was too long already, and if the girl still lived, she might not survive another night. The cave breathed cool air that carried the smell of damp stone and something else, something organic and unpleasant that made his hand tighten on his sword hilt. He lit the oil lantern he carried and stepped inside, letting his eyes adjust to the dimness while his other senses reached out for any indication of danger. The passage sloped downward and curved to the left, opening into a larger chamber that nature had carved from the living rock over centuries of patient work. What he found there drove every thought of the merchant's daughter from his mind. Chains. Heavy iron chains bolted directly into the stone wall, and at the end of those chains sat an orc woman, her green skin marked with bruises in various stages of healing, her clothing torn and filthy, her tusked mouth split and swollen. She looked up when his lantern light fell across her, and her eyes were the color of amber shot through with gold, and they held no hope at all. Cade froze in the entrance, his training warring with instinct. Orcs were the enemy, or so the stories went. Raiders who burned border settlements and stole livestock, savage warriors who knew nothing of mercy or civilization. He had fought them during his service, seen what their war parties could do to an unprepared village, and he bore the scars from those encounters etched into his flesh. But this was no raiding warrior. This was a prisoner, brutalized and left to die in the dark. "Please," she said, and her voice was rough as gravel but clear in its desperation. "Please, just make it quick." She thought he had come to kill her. The realization hit him like a physical blow. "I am not here to hurt you," Cade said carefully, keeping his hands visible and his sword sheathed. "I am tracking a missing person, a human girl taken from the trading post 6 days ago. Have you seen anyone else here?" The orc woman stared at him as though he had spoken in an unknown tongue. Then slowly she shook her head. "No one. I have been here alone since they brought me." "Who brought you?" "Slavers. Human slavers who raid the border clans and sell us in the southern markets." Her chains rattled as she shifted position, and he saw how the iron had worn the skin of her wrists raw. "They left me here 3 days ago. Said the cave was a good place to store merchandise until the buyer came through." Merchandise. The word sat bitter on his tongue. Cade moved closer, setting the lantern on a rock outcropping so he could examine the chains. They were well made and solidly anchored, designed to hold something strong, and the locks were beyond his skill to pick. He straightened and met her eyes again, seeing the way she watched him with the wariness of a wild thing that had learned too well what human kindness cost. "I am going to get you out of here," he said. "Why?" The question came flat and suspicious. "What do you want from me?" "Nothing." "Because it is the right thing to do." He pulled his waterskin from his belt and offered it to her. "My name is Cade Yancey. I am a ranger, not a slaver, and I do not leave people chained in caves to die." She took the waterskin with shaking hands, and he saw how carefully she controlled that tremor, maintaining what dignity she could. She drank deeply, water spilling over her chin and running down her neck, and when she lowered the skin her eyes had changed, just slightly, letting in the smallest glimmer of something that might have been trust. "Cora," she said. "My name is Cora." "Well met, Cora, though I wish it were under better circumstances." Cade examined the chains again, following them from the wall to the manacles at her wrists and ankles. "These locks are beyond me, but the bolts in the wall might not be. How long have you been without food?" 3 days. They left water but nothing else. He pulled dried meat and hard bread from his pack, along with cheese wrapped in cloth, and set it within her reach. "Eat slowly. Your stomach will rebel if you take too much too fast." Cora ate like someone who had forgotten what food tasted like, savoring each bite with an intensity that made his chest ache. While she ate, he worked at the wall bolts with his knife, testing the stone around them for weakness. The slavers had done their work well but not perfectly, and he found where water had seeped through a crack, softening the rock over time. "You truly mean to free me," Cora said. "It was not quite a question. I truly do." "Why, we are enemies. Your people and mine have been at war for generations." Cade paused in his work and looked at her fully. "Are we at war right now, you and I?" She blinked, clearly not expecting that response. "No. Then we are not enemies." He returned to chipping at the stone. "War is what armies do, what lords command. Right now I am just a man, and you are just a woman who needs help, and that is simple enough for me to understand." Silence stretched between them, broken only by the sound of his blade against stone and the distant drip of water somewhere deeper in the cave. Cora finished the food and hugged her knees to her chest, watching him with those extraordinary eyes that seemed to hold centuries of sorrow and strength in equal measure. "The girl you seek," she said eventually. "The merchant's daughter. I may know something of her." Cade stopped working and gave her his full attention. "Before they left me here, I heard the slavers talking. They had sold a human girl to someone 3 days north, at a place called Broken Ridge. They were pleased with the price." Her expression darkened. "They laughed about how her father would pay a fortune to get her back, but by the time any ransom could be arranged, she would be long gone." The information settled in his gut like cold iron. Broken Ridge was known territory, a lawless settlement where questions were not asked and coin spoke louder than morality. If the girl was there, she could still be found, but 3 days north was 3 days away, and Cora was here and now. "Thank you," he said quietly. "That gives me a place to start. You should go now. Every hour you waste here is an hour she remains in danger. I am not leaving you chained in a cave. I am an orc. She is a human child. Your people will never forgive you if you choose me over her." Cade met her eyes steadily. "I am not choosing one over the other. I am getting you free, then I am going after the girl. There is time for both. You cannot know that." "No," he admitted. "But I can live with myself if I am wrong, and I cannot live with myself if I leave you here to die. That is the end of the discussion." Something shifted in Cora's expression, a softening he had not thought possible. She said nothing more, simply watched as he returned to his work with renewed determination. The first bolt came free after an hour of careful chipping, the stone around it finally yielding to persistent pressure. The second took longer, but as full dark settled outside the cave, He felt it give way beneath his blade. The chains fell slack, and Cora pulled her arms forward with a gasp that was half pain, half relief. The manacles remained locked around her wrists and ankles, but at least she could move. "Can you walk?" Cade asked. Cora pushed herself upright, and he saw the effort it cost her. Her legs shook from days of limited movement, and the ankle chains forced her to take short, shuffling steps. But she stood, and that was enough. "I can manage," she said. "My camp is a mile south." "Can you make it that far tonight, or should we rest here?" She looked toward the cave entrance, where fresh air beckoned beyond the stale darkness. "I would rather sleep under open sky, even if it kills me." Cade smiled slightly. "Then let us make sure it does not kill you. Lean on me if you need to." Pride warred with practicality in her expression, and practicality won. She let him take some of her weight as they made their slow way out of the cave, into the night that had settled cool and clear over the hills. His mare snorted nervously at the sight of an orc, but settled when Cade spoke to her in the low tones she knew. The journey back to his camp took twice as long as it should have, Cora's strength failing with every step until he simply picked her up and carried her the last quarter-mile. She did not protest, too exhausted to maintain the pretense of strength, and when he laid her down on his bedroll near the small fire he had built that morning, she was already half asleep. Cade covered her with his spare blanket and set about making a proper camp. He saw to his horse, gathered more firewood, and set water to boil for tea and to clean Cora's wounds when she woke. The night settled around them with the familiar sounds of the wilderness, and he sat watch while she slept, thinking about slavers and missing girls, and the strange turns a simple tracking job could take. Cora woke near dawn, the sky just beginning to lighten in the east. She sat up slowly, disoriented, and her hand went to the manacles on her wrists as though confirming they were real. "How do you feel?" Cade asked from where he sat tending the fire. "Like I was chained in a cave for 3 days," she said, but there was a hint of dry humor in her voice that had not been there the night before. He smiled. "I have tea and more food. We need to get some strength back into you before we travel. You are still planning to go after the girl." "I am, but first I am taking you somewhere safe." Cora shook her head. "There is nowhere safe for me. My clan will not take me back." "Why not?" "Because I was foolish." She accepted the cup of tea he offered and wrapped her hands around it, savoring the warmth. "I met a human trader at the border market. He said he wanted to establish peaceful trade with the orc clans, that there was profit in cooperation instead of conflict. I believed him. I convinced 3 others to meet with him to hear his proposals." Her jaw tightened. It was a trap. "The trader was working with the slavers. My companions were killed when they fought back. I was captured because I hesitated, because I still wanted to believe peace was possible." "That does not sound foolish," Cade said quietly. "It sounds brave. My clan does not see it that way. They see a warrior who trusted the enemy and got her companions killed. I am Kaltesh, outcast. If I return, they will drive me away or kill me for my dishonor." The word sat heavy between them, carrying the weight of cultures he did not fully understand but could recognize in the grief written across her face. Cade poured his own tea and sat across the fire from her, giving her space to compose herself. "Then you will come with me," he said. "At least until we figure out something better." Cora looked at him sharply. "You cannot mean that. Traveling with an orc will mark you as a traitor to your own kind." "I travel alone by choice. Other people's opinions do not concern me much." "You would sacrifice your reputation, your standing, for someone you just met." "I would not abandon someone in need because I am worried about gossip." He met her eyes across the fire. "Look, I know we only just met, and you have no reason to trust me beyond what I have done so far. But I give you my word, Cora. You are under my protection now. That means something where I come from." She studied him for a long moment, and he let her look, understanding that she was reading him the way he would read a trail, searching for the truth beneath the surface. Whatever she saw must have satisfied her because she nodded slowly. "Then I accept your protection, Cade Yancey, and I swear I will not abuse the gift you have given me. Not a gift, basic decency. There is a difference." He stood and began breaking down the camp. "We need to move. The nearest settlement is Millbrook, 2 days west. I know a blacksmith there who can get those chains off you. After that, we turn north toward Broken Ridge. You would take an orc into a human settlement. Millbrook is different. It is a border town, used to dealing with all kinds. They will not welcome you with open arms, but they will not run you out on sight either, provided you are with me." Cora stood, testing her strength. She looked better after food and rest, though the chain still marked her as something dangerous, something to be feared. Cade made a mental note to keep his body between her and any potential trouble. They traveled west through country that grew more settled with each passing mile. The wild hills gave way to cleared land and scattered homesteads, and Cade saw the way Cora's shoulders tightened each time they spotted signs of human habitation. She said nothing, but her wariness spoke volumes. They made camp that night beside a creek, and Cade caught fish for their dinner, while Cora sat on the bank and watched the water flow past. She had been quiet all day, speaking only when spoken to, and he sensed the weight of her thoughts pressing down like a physical burden. "You can talk about it if you want," he offered as he cleaned the fish. "Sometimes speaking the thing makes it lighter." "What would you have me say? That I am frightened? That I feel lost?" Cora pulled her knees to her chest. 3 days ago I had a purpose, foolish though it was. I believed I could help my people find a better way. Now I have nothing. No clan, no honor, no future. I am alive only because a human stranger took pity on me. "Not pity," Cade said firmly. "Never pity. What I did because you deserved better than dying in that cave. You still deserve better. Why do you care? We are nothing to each other. Maybe that is exactly why I care, because I can look at you and see a person, not an orc or an enemy or any of the things I am supposed to see. Just Cora, who tried to build a bridge and got burned for it." He skewered the fish on green sticks and set them over the fire. "The world is harsh enough without good people making it worse. You tried to do something good. That matters to me." Cora was quiet for a long time, staring into the fire as though it held answers she desperately needed. When she spoke again, her voice was softer. "You are not what I expected a human to be. What did you expect? Someone harder, crueler? Someone who would have seen me as an opportunity for profit or revenge?" She glanced at him sideways. "You are gentle in your way." Cade huffed a quiet laugh. "I have been called many things, but gentle is not usually one of them. Perhaps you simply hide it better than most." They ate in companionable silence, and after dinner, Cade examined the manacles on Cora's wrists and ankles by firelight. The iron had rubbed her skin raw in places, and he cleaned the wounds with water and strips of clean cloth from his pack. "This will hurt worse before the blacksmith can remove them," he warned. "The manacles will have to be cut or broken, and that is not a gentle process." "I have survived worse," Cora said, though she flinched when he touched a particularly raw spot. "I do not doubt it." He worked carefully, aware of how close he was to her, aware of the heat of her skin and the way she held herself very still as though afraid to break the moment. When he finished, he sat back and found her watching him with an expression he could not quite read. "What is it?" he asked. "You are the first person to touch me with kindness in a very long time," Cora said quietly. "I had forgotten what it felt like." The vulnerability in those words hit him harder than he expected. Cade cleared his throat and busied himself putting away the medical supplies. "Well, You are stuck with my company for the foreseeable future, so you had better get used to it." She smiled, small and tentative, and it transformed her face in ways he had not anticipated. Suddenly, he was very aware that Cora was not just a person in need of help but a woman, strong and scarred and beautiful in the way of things that had survived fire. He looked away quickly, disturbed by the direction of his thoughts. She was under his protection, which meant such considerations were entirely inappropriate. He had given his word, and that word included treating her with honor, not entertaining thoughts that could complicate an already complex situation. If Cora noticed his discomfort, she did not comment on it. She settled down on her side of the fire, and Cade took first watch, telling himself the strange tightness in his chest was simply concern for her welfare and nothing more. Millbrook appeared on the afternoon of the second day, a collection of sturdy buildings clustered around a central square where a market was in full swing. Cade had visited the town many times over the years, knew the faces and the rhythms, and he guided Cora through the outskirts toward the smithy on the eastern edge where his friend Garrett kept his forge. People stared. Of course they stared. An orc woman in chains walking through a human settlement was not something seen every day, and Cade heard the whispers follow them like wind through grass. He kept his hand on his sword hilt, not as a threat, but as a reminder that Cora was under protection, and he met the curious and hostile stares with a level gaze that invited no challenges. Garrett was hammering a horseshoe when they arrived, his forge burning hot and bright in the dim interior of his workshop. He looked up at the sound of footsteps and froze mid-swing when he saw Cora. "Cade," he said carefully, "what in the seven hells are you doing?" "I need a favor, Garrett. Those manacles need to come off, and you are the only smith I trust to do it without causing more damage than necessary." Garrett set down his hammer and wiped his hands on his apron, studying Cora with the assessing eye of a craftsman. "She is an orc. She is a person who was held prisoner by slavers. The manacles need to come off. People are going to talk. Let them talk. Will you help or not?" Garrett sighed, the sound of a man who knew when arguing was pointless. "Bring her over to the anvil. This is going to take some doing." The process was exactly as unpleasant as Cade had warned. Garrett used a chisel and careful hammer strikes to break the locks on each manacle, working slowly to avoid shattering the bones beneath. Cora bore it with stoic silence, though Cade saw the way her hands trembled and the sheen of sweat that broke out on her forehead. When the last manacle fell away, she rubbed her wrists and looked at Garrett with genuine gratitude. "Thank you." Garrett grunted, clearly uncomfortable with being thanked by an orc. "Just do not make me regret this." "She will not," Cade said firmly. "How much do I owe you?" "Nothing. Call it a favor owed." Garrett turned back to his forge. "But Cade, be careful. There is talk of slaver activity in the area, and now with you bringing in an orc, people are going to make connections that might not be healthy for either of you. Let me worry about that." They left the smithy and Cade led Cora to the town's only inn, a sturdy establishment run by a widow named Martha, who had known him since he first settled in the region. She took one look at Cora and raised her eyebrows but said nothing, simply showed them to a room on the second floor and promised dinner would be ready within the hour. "You will have a proper bed tonight," Cade said as he set his pack on the floor. "I will take the floor." Cora looked at the bed as though she had never seen one before. "I have not slept in a bed in months." "Then enjoy it. You have earned that much and more." She sat on the edge of the mattress, testing it carefully, and something in her expression made Cade's chest ache. He busied himself checking his weapons and gear, giving her privacy to process the small luxury. Dinner was served in the common room, and Cade saw the way conversation died when they entered. He chose a table in the corner where he could put his back to the wall and keep an eye on the room, and Cora sat across from him, acutely aware of the attention they were drawing. "They are afraid of me," she said quietly. "They are afraid of what they do not understand. Give them time to see you are not a threat. How much time do we have? We leave for Broken Ridge in the morning. I need to ask around tonight, see if anyone has information about the slavers or the merchant's daughter." Cora nodded, pushing food around her plate without much appetite. Cade ate quickly, and then spent the evening moving through the common room, speaking with people he knew and buying drinks for those he did not. Information came slowly, in pieces and fragments, but by the time the crowd thinned he had learned enough to confirm what Cora had told him. Slavers had been active in the region, and Broken Ridge was known as a place where such trade occurred beyond the reach of crown law. He returned to the corner table to find Cora exactly where he had left her, her plate still half full. "Not hungry?" he asked. "Too many eyes," she admitted. "I feel like prey waiting for the predator to strike. No one is going to hurt you while I am here." He kept his voice low and calm. "But if you are done, we can go back to the room. You need rest before we travel tomorrow." They climbed the stairs under the weight of curious stares, and Cade locked the door behind them once they were safely inside. Cora went to the window and looked out at the darkened street, her shoulders tight with tension. "This is harder than the cave," she said. "At least there I knew what to expect. I know. But you are doing well. Better than well, actually. You are stronger than you think." She turned to face him, and in the lamplight her eyes held shadows he wished he could chase away. "I do not feel strong. I feel like I am one wrong move away from falling apart." Cade crossed the room without thinking, drawn by the raw honesty in her voice. He stopped just short of touching her, aware of the line he was about to cross but unable to stop himself. "Then fall apart. I will help you pick up the pieces." Cora's breath caught, and for a moment they stood frozen, the space between them charged with something neither was quite ready to name. Then she stepped back, breaking the moment, and Cade felt equal parts relief and disappointment. "You should sleep," he said, his voice rougher than intended. "I will keep watch. You need rest too." "I will manage. Sleep, Cora, that is an order." She smiled slightly at that, recognizing the deflection for what it was, but she did not argue. She lay down on the bed fully clothed, and within minutes her breathing had evened out into the rhythm of sleep. Cade sat in the chair by the window and watched the night deepen over Millbrook, thinking about orc women with amber eyes and wondering when exactly his simple tracking job had become something far more complicated. Morning came with rain, a steady drumming against the roof that promised to make the journey north miserable. Cade woke Cora gently, and they ate breakfast in relative peace, the common room mostly empty at the early hour. Martha packed them food for the road and refused payment, pressing the bundle into Cade's hands with a knowing look that made him distinctly uncomfortable. "You are doing a good thing," she said quietly. "Do not let small-minded people tell you otherwise." "Thank you, Martha." They rode north through rain that never quite became a storm, but never fully stopped either. Cora sat behind Cade on the mare, her arms wrapped around his waist for balance, and he tried very hard not to think about the warmth of her body pressed against his back, or the way her breath stirred the hair at the nape of his neck. The road to Broken Ridge wound through country that grew progressively rougher and less settled. By mid-afternoon, they had left behind the last farmsteads and entered true wilderness, the kind of place where the Crown's authority was more suggestion than law. Cade remained alert for signs of trouble, and twice they detoured around areas that felt wrong in ways he could not articulate but trusted nonetheless. They made camp that night in a sheltered hollow off the road, and Cade rigged a tarp to provide some protection from the rain. They huddled beneath it while water drummed overhead, eating cold food because starting a fire in the wet would have been more trouble than it was worth. "Tell me about the girl we are looking for," Cora said, breaking the comfortable silence that had settled between them. "Her name is Eliza. 16 years old, daughter of a merchant named Thomas Reid. She vanished from the trading post 6 days ago. No witnesses, no sign of struggle, like she simply disappeared. And you think the slavers took her? Based on what you told me, yes. They have a pattern of taking people from border settlements, holding them briefly, then moving them north to markets where questions are not asked." Cora was quiet for a moment. "What will you do when you find her? Get her home safely. That is the job. And after? Will you go back to tracking and ranging, pretending this never happened?" Cade looked at her, trying to read the intention behind the question. "What are you really asking me?" "I am asking what happens to me when your job is done. Do I simply fade back into the wilderness and out of your life?" The thought of that bothered him more than it should have. "Is that what you want?" "I do not know what I want anymore. A week ago I knew my place in the world, even if I disagreed with it. Now everything is uncertain and the only constant is you." She met his eyes. "That frightens me." "Me too," Cade admitted quietly. "You frighten me, Cora, not because you are an orc, but because I find myself caring what happens to you far more than is wise." "Why is it unwise?" "Because my people and your people do not mix. Because whatever this is between us, it has no future. Because I am supposed to protect you, not develop feelings for you." The words hung in the damp air between them, more honest than he had intended to be. Cora looked away, her expression unreadable in the dim light. "For what it is worth," she said eventually, "I find myself caring for you too. And yes, it terrifies me, because caring has only brought me pain." Cade wanted to reach for her, to offer comfort or promise or something to ease the ache he heard in her voice. But he kept his hands to himself, understanding that some distances existed for good reason. They slept back to back that night, sharing warmth beneath the tarp while rain fell endlessly around them. Cade lay awake for hours, hyper-aware of every point where Cora's body touched his, wondering when exactly he had crossed the line from protector to something dangerously close to lover. Broken Ridge revealed itself the next afternoon, a collection of ramshackle buildings clinging to a hillside like a fungus. There was no law here beyond what individuals could enforce, and Cade felt the weight of hostile eyes on them from the moment they entered the settlement's outskirts. "Stay close," he murmured to Cora, "and if trouble starts, you run. Do not try to help me, just run and keep running until you are clear. I am not leaving you to fight alone. You will if I tell you to. That is not negotiable." She did not respond, which was not the same as agreeing, and Cade made a mental note to keep her behind him at all times. They moved through Broken Ridge slowly, and Cade marked potential trouble with the practiced eye of someone who had survived plenty of it. A group of rough men drinking outside what passed for a tavern watched them with calculating interest. A woman in a doorway made a warning sign when she saw Cora. Children scattered like startled birds when the mare's hooves clopped on the muddy street. The building Cade sought sat at the far end of the settlement, larger than the others and better maintained. A sign proclaimed it as the Ridge Trading Post, and through the windows he could see shelves stocked with goods both legal and otherwise. He dismounted and helped Cora down, then tied the mare where he could keep an eye on her. "Let me do the talking," he told Cora, "and try not to look too threatening. I am an orc. Simply existing is threatening to these people. Fair point, just stay behind me and we will manage." The interior of the trading post smelled like tobacco and old leather. A man stood behind the counter, lean and weathered with eyes that missed nothing. He looked up when they entered and his expression went carefully neutral. "Help you?" he asked. "Information," Cade said, laying a silver coin on the counter. "I am looking for a girl. 16, dark hair, taken by slavers about 6 days ago. I heard she might have passed through here." The man looked at the coin but did not touch it. "Do not know anything about that." Cade laid another coin beside the first. "Are you sure? Because I can be very generous to people who help me and very unpleasant to people who lie to me." "That an orc you have got with you. Her business is her own. We are here about the girl." The man finally picked up the coins, testing their weight before making them disappear into his vest. "Might have heard something. There was a group came through 3 days back, had a girl with them, pretty thing, crying and carrying on. They sold her to a man heading east toward the mining camps." "What man?" calls himself Derek. Big fellow, scar across his face like someone tried to split him open. Runs a brothel in the camps, always looking for fresh merchandise. Cade's jaw tightened. "Where are these camps?" 2 days east, up in the foothills." "But if I were you, I would think twice about going up there. Derek has got a lot of friends and they do not take kindly to interference. Let me worry about that. Anything else you can tell me? Just that you should watch yourselves. Word got out you have been traveling with an orc. Some folks around here do not much care for that sort of thing." "Noted. Thank you for the information." They left the trading post and Cade immediately began considering their options. 2 days east meant Eliza had been in Derek's hands for at least a day already, maybe more. Every hour they delayed was another hour she suffered, but rushing in without a plan would only get them all killed. "We need supplies," he said to Cora. "And we need to figure out our approach. This Derek is not going to simply hand over the girl because I ask nicely. Then we take her by force. We need to be smarter than that. He has got men, defenses, the advantage of terrain. A frontal assault would be suicide." They were still discussing options when the trouble Cade had been expecting finally materialized. The group of men from the tavern had followed them and now blocked the street ahead, 6 of them spread out in a loose semicircle. "That is far enough," the leader said. He was a big man gone to fat, with a beard that had not seen proper care in months. "We do not much care for orc lovers in Broken Ridge." Cade shifted his stance, putting himself between Cora and the men. "We are just passing through. No need for trouble. Too late for that. See, having an orc here is bad for business. Makes people nervous. So we are going to need you to leave the greenskin with us and you can be on your way." "That is not happening." The man grinned, showing teeth gone brown at the edges. "Did not really think you would see reason. Boys, teach him what happens to traitors." They came in a rush, and Cade met them with the cold efficiency of someone who had survived worse odds. His sword cleared the scabbard in a smooth draw, and the first man went down with a scream, clutching a ruined arm. The second caught an elbow to the face that sent teeth flying. The third made the mistake of trying to grapple and found himself on the ground with Cade's boot on his throat. The leader pulled a knife and lunged, but Cora was faster. She grabbed his wrist and twisted, using his momentum to send him sprawling into the mud. Then she planted her foot on his back and leaned down to speak directly into his ear. "He told you no," she said quietly. "I suggest you listen." The remaining men backed away, their enthusiasm for the fight evaporating in the face of actual resistance. Cade kept his sword up and ready, tracking each potential threat with the focus of a predator. "We are leaving now," he said. "Anyone who wants to stop us is welcome to try." No one took him up on the offer. They mounted up and rode east out of Broken Ridge at a steady pace that was not quite a run but made it clear they were not lingering. Only when the settlement had disappeared behind them did Cade let himself relax slightly. "That was foolish," he said to Cora. "I told you to run if there was trouble. And I ignored you. Deal with it." Despite everything, Cade found himself smiling. "You are going to be the death of me, probably. but at least you will not die bored." They rode hard for the rest of the day, putting as much distance between themselves and Broken Ridge as possible. The country grew hillier and more forested, the road becoming little more than a suggestion worn into the landscape by cart wheels and foot traffic. That night they made cold camp in a dense thicket, no fire to mark their position. They ate dried food and spoke in whispers, aware that sounds carried far in the still air. "Tell me about these mining camps," Cora said. "What should I expect?" "Lawless places where men work themselves to death digging ore from the earth, then spend what little they earn on drink and other diversions. Derek provides those diversions, and he protects his business viciously." Cade checked his weapons by touch in the darkness. "We will need to scout the area first, find where he is keeping Eliza, then get her out without triggering a general alarm." "You make it sound simple. It will not be, but I have done harder things and now I have help. You trust me to help you. You proved yourself in Broken Ridge." "Yes, I trust you." Cora was silent for a long moment. "No one has said that to me in a very long time. Thank you. You have earned it." He settled down with his back against a tree trunk. "Get some sleep. We have got hard days ahead." "Cade?" "Yes." "Whatever happens in those camps, I want you to know that these past days have meant something to me. You have given me hope when I thought I had none left, and I will not forget that." Cade's throat tightened with emotion he could not quite name. "It has meant something to me too, Cora. More than I know how to say." She moved closer in the darkness, and he felt her hand find his, their fingers intertwining in a simple gesture that carried the weight of everything they had not said. They fell asleep like that, connected, and Cade dreamed of green skin and amber eyes and a future that felt impossible but desperately wanted. The mining camps appeared on the second day, a sprawling collection of tents and rough structures clinging to the hillsides like a disease. The sound of picks on stone echoed through the valley, a constant percussion that spoke of back-breaking labor and desperate men. Smoke from cook fires and smelting operations hung in the air, acrid and choking. Cade and Cora approached carefully, circling the camps from high ground to get a sense of the layout. Derek's establishment was easy to spot, a two-story building near the center of the camp that had been constructed with more care than anything else in sight. Guards stood at the entrance and more patrolled the perimeter. "There," Cade said, pointing to a small window on the second floor. "If I were holding someone prisoner, that is where I would keep them. Upper floor, away from easy escape routes where the guards can control access." "How do we get inside?" "We do not. I go in alone through the back. You stay here and watch for trouble." "Absolutely not. Cora, we have been through this. And my answer has not changed. We are in this together or not at all." Cade wanted to argue to insist she stay safe, but he recognized the futility of it. Cora had made her choice and he had to respect that even if it terrified him. "Fine. But you follow my lead, and if I tell you to run, you run." "Agreed." "Agreed." They waited until nightfall, when the camp settled into the raucous celebration that apparently occurred every evening. Drunk miners stumbled between tents and buildings, their judgment impaired and attention scattered. Cade and Cora used the chaos as cover, slipping through the shadows toward the rear of Derek's establishment. A back door stood partially open, light and sound spilling out into the night. Cade peered inside and saw a kitchen where a tired-looking woman was scrubbing pots with the mechanical efficiency of someone who had long since stopped thinking about what she was doing. He waited until she turned away, then slipped inside with Cora right behind him. A narrow staircase led to the upper floor, and they climbed it slowly, testing each step for creaks. Voices filtered through the walls, men laughing and women's voices pitched in false enthusiasm. The sounds made Cade's skin crawl, but he pushed the disgust aside and focused on the task. The hallway at the top of the stairs was dimly lit by oil lamps. 3 doors on the left, 2 on the right, and 1 at the far end that likely led to Derek's private quarters. Cade approached the first door and pressed his ear against it, listening. Nothing. The second door revealed similar silence, but at the third he heard something that made him freeze. Crying, soft and muffled, the sound of someone who had no tears left but could not stop anyway. He tested the door handle and found it locked. A simple mechanism, easily defeated by someone with his experience. He worked quickly, his picks making almost no sound, and felt the lock give way after less than a minute. The room beyond was small and sparsely furnished. A bed, a wash basin, a single chair. And on the bed, curled into a ball with her face buried in her knees, was a girl who matched the description of Eliza Reed. "Eliza," Cade said quietly, "I am here to take you home." She looked up with eyes swollen from crying, and for a moment she simply stared as though unable to believe he was real. Then she lunged off the bed and grabbed his arm with desperate strength. "Please," she whispered, "please get me out of here. That is the plan, but we need to move quietly." "Can you do that?" She nodded frantically. Cade turned to lead them back the way they had come and found himself face to face with Derek. The man was exactly as described, a giant of a human with a scar that ran from his temple to his jaw. He held a cudgel in one massive hand and wore an expression of violent anticipation. "Well now," he said, "looks like we have got thieves in the house." Cade shoved Eliza toward Cora. "Get her out of here. Now." Cora grabbed the girl and pulled her toward the stairs, but more men were already coming up from below, cutting off that escape route. They were trapped in the narrow hallway with enemies on both sides. "Change of plan," Cade said. He pointed to the window at the end of the hall. "Out that way." "I will buy you time." "I am not leaving you," Cora said. "You are if you want this girl to survive. Go, Cora, please." Something in his voice must have convinced her, because she nodded once and dragged Eliza toward the window. Cade turned to face Derek, his sword already singing free of its scabbard. "You made a mistake coming here," Derek said, advancing with the confidence of someone who had won fights before. "Probably," Cade agreed, "but I have made mistakes before." Derek swung the cudgel in a vicious arc meant to shatter bone, but Cade ducked beneath it and drove his shoulder into the bigger man's midsection. They crashed into the wall hard enough to crack plaster, and then it was brutal close-quarters work, all knees and elbows and desperate strikes. Behind him, Cade heard glass shatter as Cora broke the window. He drove his fist into Derek's throat and bought himself enough space to turn and run. Cora had already gotten Eliza out onto the roof, and she reached back to help pull Cade through. "Jump," she said, pointing to a lower roof section perhaps 8 feet below. "I will go first with the girl." She did not wait for his agreement, simply grabbed Eliza and leaped. They landed hard but safe, and Cade followed a moment later, his boots sending up puffs of dust from the sun-dried shingles. Shouts of alarm echoed from inside the building, and the sound of pursuit was close behind. They ran across the rooftops, leaping gaps and sliding down slopes while angry voices followed. At the edge of the last building, Cade saw his mare waiting where they had left her, and beyond her the dark wilderness that offered the only hope of escape. "One more jump," he told Eliza. "Into the hay pile there." "Can you do it?" The girl nodded, too frightened to speak, and jumped. She landed with a soft thump and rolled clear. Cora went next, landing cat-like on her feet, and then Cade followed, hitting the ground hard enough to jar his teeth. They ran for the horse, and Cade threw Eliza into the saddle, then climbed up behind her with Cora mounting behind him. The mare protested the triple load but responded to his urgency, launching into a gallop that carried them away from the mining camp and into the blessed darkness of the forest. They rode hard for hours, following game trails by moonlight and instinct, putting as much distance as possible between themselves and Derek's fury. Only when the horse was near collapse did Cade finally allow them to stop, in a clearing beside a stream where the mare could drink and rest. Eliza slid from the saddle and immediately collapsed into Cora's arms, sobbing with the force of delayed terror. Cora held her with surprising gentleness, murmuring words in her own language that sounded like comfort, even if the girl could not understand them. Cade tended to the horse and then scouted their immediate surroundings, making sure they had not been followed. When he returned to the clearing, Eliza had cried herself into exhausted sleep, still wrapped in Cora's arms. "You were magnificent," he said quietly. "I did what needed doing." "The same as you. We make a good team." "Yes," Cora said, and there was something in her voice that made Cade's pulse quicken. "We do." They sat in silence, watching over the sleeping girl while the night deepened around them. Cade's body ached from the fight and the desperate flight, but his mind was clear, focused on the woman sitting across from him and the realization that he did not want this to end. "What happens now?" Cora asked, as though reading his thoughts. "Now we get Eliza home safely. After that, I do not know. You could go back to your life. Forget about the orc woman you rescued from a cave. I could, but I do not want to." Cora met his eyes across the space between them. "What do you want, Cade Yancey? I want you to stay. I want to see where this goes, whatever this is. I want to wake up knowing you are there and go to sleep with you beside me. I want things I have no right to want and make no practical sense, but I want them anyway. My people will never accept it. Yours will not either. Then we will make our own way. Find somewhere on the border where people are too busy surviving to care about old prejudices. Build something new. You would give up your life for me. I would build a new life with you. There is a difference." Cora looked away, but not before he saw the shimmer of tears in her eyes. "I am frightened, Cade. I have lost so much already. I do not know if I can bear losing you too." He crossed the distance between them and took her hands in his. "Then do not lose me. Stay. Fight for this the way you fought to free your people. Take the risk, even knowing it might hurt. And if it does hurt, if we fail, then at least we will have tried. At least we will have had this." Cora searched his face in the moonlight, looking for doubt or hesitation and finding none. Then slowly she nodded. "Yes, I will stay. I will try." Cade pulled her close and kissed her, a gentle press of lips that held all the promise he could not put into words. She responded with a fierceness that stole his breath, her hands fisting in his shirt as though afraid he might disappear. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Cora rested her forehead against his. "This is madness. The best things usually are." They held each other while Eliza slept and the stars wheeled overhead, and Cade felt something settle in his chest that he had not known was missing. Peace, perhaps, or purpose, or simply the knowledge that he had found something worth protecting, something worth building a life around. Morning came with birdsong and the gentle sound of the stream. Eliza woke confused and disoriented until memory returned, and then she started crying again, this time with relief. "It is over," Cade assured her. "You are safe. We are taking you home." "Thank you," she managed between sobs. "Thank you so much. Thank Cora, too. She is the one who kept you safe while I dealt with Derek." Eliza looked at Cora with wide eyes, clearly uncertain how to respond to an orc who had saved her life. Cora smiled slightly and offered the girl some dried fruit from her pack. "Eat," she said. "You need your strength." They traveled south and west for 3 days, taking a longer but safer route that avoided settlements where Derek's influence might reach. Eliza gradually relaxed in their company, and Cade saw the way she watched Cora with growing curiosity rather than fear. On the second day, while Cade was refilling waterskins at a creek, Eliza approached Cora where she sat sharpening a knife Cade had given her. "Can I ask you something?" The girl said tentatively. "You may ask, I may not answer." "Why did you help me? I am human. I thought orcs hated us." Cora considered the question carefully. "Hate is easy. It requires no thought, no effort. Understanding is harder but more rewarding. I helped you because you needed help, and because the man I care for asked it of me. And because I hope that if our people see us working together, helping each other, perhaps the hate will lose its power. Do you think that is possible? I think it has to be, or we are all doomed to repeat the same violence forever." Cora set aside the knife. "What do you think? Can you imagine a world where humans and orcs are not enemies?" Eliza was quiet for a long moment. "I can now. Because of you and Cade, you proved it is possible. Then perhaps there is hope after all." Cade watched the exchange from a distance and felt his chest swell with something that might have been pride or love or both. Cora was right. They were building something new, one small act of kindness at a time, and if that was not worth fighting for, he did not know what was. The trading post appeared on the fourth day, and with it Thomas Reed, who had been pacing the grounds in a state of frantic worry since learning his daughter had been taken. When he saw Eliza alive and well, he broke down sobbing and ran to pull her into his arms. "Thank the gods," he kept saying. "Thank the gods you are alive." Eliza hugged her father tight, then pulled back and pointed to Cade and Cora. "They saved me, Father. They risked everything to bring me home." Thomas looked at them properly for the first time, and his expression shifted when he saw Cora. But whatever prejudice he might have held was overwhelmed by gratitude for his daughter's return. "I do not care what you are," he said to Cora. "You brought my daughter back. You have my eternal thanks, and anything I can offer is yours." "I want nothing but your daughter's safety," Cora said quietly. "That is reward enough." Thomas insisted on paying Cade triple the agreed-upon fee, and when Cade tried to refuse, the merchant simply pressed the coin purse into his hands. "Use it to build a life," he said. "Whatever life you choose. You have earned that much." They stayed at the trading post only long enough to rest the horse and gather fresh supplies. Cade could feel the curious stares and whispered conversations that followed them, and he knew word of the human ranger and his orc companion would spread quickly. Let it spread, he thought. Let people see that another way was possible. They left the trading post on a clear morning and rode west toward the frontier lands where the maps grew vague and authority was what you made of it. Cade had heard of a valley 2 weeks' ride from anywhere important, a place where a man could build a homestead and live according to his own rules. "What will we do there?" Cora asked as they rode. "Whatever we want, build a house, raise horses, help travelers who lose their way, live." It sounds simple. The best things usually are. They rode in comfortable silence, and Cade thought about the future spreading out before them like an unmarked trail. There would be challenges, certainly. Prejudice would not disappear overnight, and building a life from nothing was never easy. But they would face it together, and that made all the difference. 3 weeks later, they stood on a hilltop overlooking the valley Cade had heard about. Green and lush and empty of other human or orc habitation, it was exactly what they needed. A creek ran through the center, bordered by stands of timber perfect for building. Game trails marked the hillsides, promising food, and the soil looked rich enough to support a garden. "What do you think?" Cade asked. Cora smiled, and it was the first time he had seen her look truly happy. "I think it is perfect. I think we can make a home here." "Then let us get started." They worked through the summer and into autumn, building a sturdy cabin from timber they cut themselves. Cade's experience as a ranger served them well, and Cora's strength made tasks easier that would have been backbreaking alone. They built corrals for the horses they planned to raise, cleared land for a garden, dug a proper well. And in the evenings, they sat on the porch Cade had built and watched the sun set over their valley and talked about everything and nothing. Cora told him about orc culture, the clan structures and honor codes he had never understood before. Cade shared stories from his years serving the crown, the battles and the boredom and the reasons he had left it all behind. "You ever regret it?" Cora asked one night as stars emerged overhead. "Giving up your old life for this?" "Not for a moment. Do you?" "My old life involved being chained in a cave waiting to die. This is significantly better." Cade laughed and pulled her close. "I should hope so. Otherwise I have been doing this wrong." "You are doing just fine," Cora murmured, and kissed him in the way he had come to crave, fierce and gentle and full of promise. Autumn gave way to winter, and they faced their first real test when a storm rolled through and dumped 3 feet of snow in 2 days. But the cabin held strong, and they had stockpiled enough food to last them through. And honestly, Cade did not mind being snowed in with Cora for a few weeks. They used the time to plan for spring, drawing out ideas for expanding the corrals and where to plant the garden. Cora suggested they could offer their home as a way station for travelers, a place where humans and orcs both would be welcome. "A neutral ground," she said, "where people can see that cooperation is possible. I like it, though we will need to build guest quarters if we are hosting travelers." Then we build guest quarters. Spring came with its explosion of green growth and new possibilities. They planted the garden and watched the first travelers arrive, cautious at first but warming when they saw the genuine welcome offered. A human family heading west stopped for 3 days and left with full bellies and stories of the unusual couple who had helped them. An orc trader passing through shared news from the clans and looked at Cora with something that might have been approval. Word spread slowly but steadily. The valley where a human ranger and an orc woman had built a life together, where old enemies could sit at the same table and share a meal. Some called it madness. Others called it hope. Cade called it home. A year after they had first arrived in the valley, Cade woke before dawn and found Cora already up, standing on the porch and watching the sunrise paint the sky in shades of gold and rose. "Could not sleep?" he asked, joining her. "Too much thinking." "About what?" Cora was quiet for a moment, and when she spoke her voice carried a weight he had not heard before. "About how much my life has changed. How a year ago I was waiting to die in a cave and now I have this." "Have you? Have hope for the future? Regrets?" "None. But I was thinking that perhaps we should make it official." "Official how?" She turned to face him fully, and in the dawn light her eyes shone with emotion. "I do not know human customs well, but I understand there is a ceremony, a binding of lives, marriage." Cade's breath caught. "Are you asking me to marry you?" "I am, if you will have me." He laughed, sudden and joyful, and pulled her into his arms. "Yes, absolutely yes. I have been trying to figure out how to ask you for months." "You are terrible at this," Cora said, but she was smiling, apparently. "Good thing you are better at being direct." They married in the summer, in a simple ceremony conducted by a traveling priest who was too kind to refuse them despite the unconventional nature of the union. Thomas Reed attended with Eliza, bringing gifts and goodwill. The orc trader who had passed through in spring returned with others from the borderland clans, curious to see what Cora had built. It was small and strange and perfect, a gathering of humans and orcs who had chosen to see each other as people rather than enemies. And when Cade kissed his bride under the open sky, with their assembled guests cheering, he knew they had accomplished something rare. They had built a bridge where none had existed before. The years that followed brought more travelers, more stories, more proof that the old hatreds did not have to define the future. Some came seeking shelter, others came seeking hope, and Cade and Cora welcomed them all. They expanded the homestead, built proper guest quarters, established a reputation as a place where fairness ruled and prejudice was not tolerated. Children came too, eventually. A daughter with her mother's green skin and her father's eyes, who grew up knowing she was loved and special and proof that two worlds could blend into something beautiful. Then a son, and another daughter after that, each one a testament to what Cora and Cade had created together. And on quiet evenings when the children were asleep and the travelers settled in their quarters, Cade and Cora would sit on the porch they had built together and remember how it all started. 6 days of tracking that led to a cave, chains and freedom, fear and trust, and the choice to build something new rather than accept the limitations of old hatreds. "You ever think about what would have happened if you had left me in that cave?" Cora asked one such evening, her head resting on Cade's shoulder. "Sometimes. But then I remember I am not the kind of man who could have done that, and you are not the kind of woman who gives up, so really this was inevitable." Inevitable. We were always going to find each other. Maybe not in that cave, maybe not on that day, but somehow. The universe is funny that way. Cora smiled and laced her fingers through his. "I like that thought, that we were meant to find each other." "So do I." They sat in comfortable silence while stars emerged overhead and the sounds of their homestead settled into the peaceful rhythm of evening. Somewhere a horse nickered softly. Inside, one of the children made a sound in their sleep. The creek burbled its endless song, and Cade Yancey, former ranger and current builder of bridges, held his wife close and thought about how the best things in life were the ones you never planned for. The unexpected encounters that changed everything. The risks taken on faith rather than certainty. The choice to see possibility instead of limitation. He had tracked a missing person for 6 days and found an orc prisoner chained in a cave instead, and that simple twist of fate had given him everything he had never known he wanted. A home. A family. A purpose that went beyond simple survival to something approaching meaning. The future stretched out before them, unwritten and full of promise. There would be challenges still, certainly. The world was slow to change and prejudice ran deep. But they had proven that change was possible, one small act of kindness at a time, one bridge built between old enemies. And that, Cade thought as Cora's breathing evened out into sleep against his shoulder, was a legacy worth leaving behind. The moon rose full and bright over the valley they had claimed, painting everything in shades of silver. Somewhere an owl called, and the night wind carried the scent of growing things. Cade gently lifted Cora and carried her inside, laying her carefully in the bed they shared, then checked on each of the children before returning to his own rest. He fell asleep with a smile on his face and peace in his heart, knowing that whatever tomorrow brought, they would face it together. The ranger and the orc, the bridge builders, the proof that love could cross any divide if you were brave enough to take the first step. And in the valley where old enemies had become family, the stars wheeled overhead and the world turned, and everything was exactly as it should be.